Welcome to episode 5 of Paranormal Unwrapped with Krista Risa and Jack Roth. Krista is a channel for the Orion Council, teacher, and artist. Jack is an investigative journalist, author, and award-winning filmmaker. In this segment, we are doing a 1-hour special interview with Miguel Mendonça, author of Being with the Beings, Meet the Hybrids, and We Are the Disclosure series. Welcome to the show, everyone.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Thanks for being here.
Hey, Miguel, how are you?
Good. Pumped. So
good. And for everyone watching this, just so they know, you're from across the pond. You're from England, correct? So we're calling you from long distance.
I'm from across a couple of ponds. Obviously, I was born in Africa, so then I skipped the pond to England. So I'm permanently. I guess we're all across the pond.
Yeah,
it's all relative.
That's true. That's true. It is relative. Well, good to have you, man. We're excited. This is our first 1-hour interview. So we're really excited to talk to you. Obviously,
so I'm like a one-man shakedown crew.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
Cool.
This is so ironic that you went from, we have a similar story. We went from sort of agricultural stuff to extraterrestrials. I was working on a farm and just started channeling. You were in permaculture, but were you studying it? Were you working the soil? What were you doing before?
I studied forestry and landscape management, and then I did about 10 years bouncing around, just doing that kind of work in London, the southeast of England, different spots. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And did you come across anything unusual? Strange markings, crop circles? Is this what started it, or?
Do you know what? I think I had to leave that work behind because I didn't find anything unusual. I mean, I really thought that the people I was working with would be more spiritual types. I really thought they would have a connection with the earth, but they could have been doing anything. They could have been stacking shelves or accounting. I mean, no, it was not that kind of world. It was no, it's just not weird enough for me, really.
So how did your third eye get open? Because in your We Are the Disclosures, here's part 1, here's part 2. You repeatedly quote the United States where they say there's no such evidence that extraterrestrials exist, and this is upsetting for people like ourselves who've had these experiences, like the people in that you interviewed in all your books. And so I just remember working near London, getting on the tube. They would hand out those free newspapers, kind of like Inquirer, whatever, in America. And they would report to you what all the MPs or the ministers of parliament were spending their money on that basically belongs to the people. And do you think maybe England is just more open to this sort of thing? You have people like Nick Pope whistleblowing. I mean, there are not that many UFO conferences over there. You're one of the pioneers in this field. What?
Well, there have been pioneers at it for a long time in this country. I mean, I remember reading Timothy Good's books in the 90s. So, there's some of it, but this is a witheringly conservative nation. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, a handful of spiritual towns. Glastonbury obviously being the mother of them all, but you just don't get a lot of it. Generally, people are just doing the they're just doing the same thing everybody else is. Really, they're just doing the grind, not in a particularly awakened state, and left in a sort of permanently, and it's difficult to expand in this kind of world. I mean, we all know this. This is, if you live as this kind of person in in amongst the muggles, regular folk, it's pretty weird. If you're trying to open up a discussion with people. But I do find that, and I'm sure you guys do, that generally you can, if you make it a safe space, people are more likely to walk into it with you. If you shove it in their face and say it's all true, the planet is run by a cabal of the Greys, and I don't know, pick any conspiratorial groups you fancy. That's tough for people. It's too much information. You kind of have to start, I find, with where they are, and just generally elicit from them their spiritual perspective and their cosmological perspective, because most people have one, whether they recognize it or not, whether they spend any time there mentally. It's still there. It's the context for their life, but it's not necessarily upfront or meaningful or apparent or pertinent to their life at that point. It's really, as you guys know, only if you have an experience that it all changes. My first was when I was 3, so I thought that was normal, to be visited by a formless consciousness. I thought we all had that. And then I just discovered you have to kind of not talk about this stuff, because people go, when I was a kid, the most common thing that people would say when they met me was, "You're weird." Across the board. And I was just something else, and I felt, frankly, from a very early age, like I was a visitor, like I was not this, whatever these guys were. Like I was trying to find my people, I guess. And in different walks of life, I thought I was going to run into them. And everywhere I went, nothing. The occasional person that was kind of switched on and involved metaphysically, or at least just interested, at least trying to get somewhere in their understanding of what this is. And I was lucky. I did meet some great people, but most of them were not where we're at, because it's a major intellectual investment. It takes time to read about it, to talk to people about it, to then go out into the world with this new information. I remember the first day I went out after, I think, the first of the hybrids that I spoke to, I think it was Jacqueline Smith. And when Barbara and I were doing the interviewing for Meet the Hybrids, and the next day I went to, very early in the morning, to St. Nick's Market in Bristol, St. Nicholas's Market, right in the centre. And I was sat there watching everybody opening up the stalls in the market. And I remember the surge of anxiety in me when I asked myself the question, how many of these people within a half mile could be hybrids, could be something completely different? And it was weird. It was a tough thing to kind of take on, and it's a tough way to walk into the world, but it gets better.
Right. So, you've been on this journey for a while now. Obviously, you had your first experience when you were 3. You started out doing professionally. You did environmental work, and you were traveling a lot, meeting in different countries around the world. We want to talk about a couple of your books, not in order, and there's a strategy behind that. But one of the things how did you first get from when did you decide, okay, I'm going to get into this big time. I'm going to take the plunge. I'm going to start doing the research necessary, because these books they're hefty books. There's a lot of information. I mean, you did a ton of work for these books. I mean, you interview people from all over the world. Some of these people, not easy to tie down. I mean, it's unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, just really, really well written too. And so how did you make that? When did you decide, you know what, I need to find out more. I'm going to go in. Not only am I going to find out more, but I'm going to share this with others. And this is what I need to do. How did that happen for you?
Yeah. So the first sighting that was unequivocal was 2009, a craft sighting that was over the Azores that I shared with Louise, my nearest and dearest. Just this light going across the sky and just expanding and just going like a bullet. I mean, like a streak of light, 1,000 miles long. And the fact that we both saw it, I mean, I don't even think we talked about it for a day or two. It was just so. But when we got back from vacation, it's that thing, right? Everybody knows that itch that you are trying to scratch. And because I think that it was resonating with me strongly because of my first, experience when I was a kid. So, and I'd always been interested in UFOs. My father gave me my first book on the subject when I was 5 and took me to see Star Wars. And that is obviously a very expanding kind of experience for a kid. And then I just went absolutely overboard. I just watched collectively. I have no idea how many hundreds of hours of videos, lectures, interviews, and read stacks of books. And piece by piece, I just got the sense that this is legit, and it's complex, and it's important. And for some reason, I just felt always very connected to it. Then I started writing a novel about trying to build a narrative into which all of the reported phenomena could slot. Like, what would have to be the story on this planet in order that all these things are happening, all these things are taking place? What would have to be the backstory for that? And as part of that, I wrote in a character who was based on Barbara Lamb. And because when I saw her lectures, I mean, I was just trying to get my mind around how this sweet little old lady could be talking about having sex with ETs as if she was, sharing a recipe for chicken soup. It was bananas. And yeah, and I mean, that obviously started a process for me. And I reached out to her, and I just had to hope she was one of those people who takes the time to connect, and she was. And that's why this conversation is taking place. And that's why if people reach out to me, I always do my best to help in any way that I can, even if it's just signposting and putting people in touch with one another. Because if she had not bothered with an email or not made herself available, none of my books would have happened. And all the people that got what they got out of it, and all the people that I put in touch with one another, never would have happened. And that wouldn't have happened if MUFON had not been willing to put her lecture on YouTube for free. They didn't sit on it and try and sell it. They just said, here it is. And that's the sort of stuff that changes things. I mean, obviously everybody's going to make a buck, but those were the circumstances that allowed me to have that first conversation with Barbara. And right away she started talking about an organization that was a mixture of therapists, experiencers, scientists, researchers, hybrids, etc. And they were trying to find a way to bring this information out to the wider public. And I obviously had given this a lot of thought overnight. As I woke up the next morning, I wrote a bunch of notes, turned that into a discussion paper, sent that to Barbara, and I said, here's my suggestion. If you want to get this work out, this information, let us pull together. I'm a researcher, I'm a writer, publisher. I can do all of that stuff. You are the researcher in this field. You have all the contacts. I mean, and she got the sense in that and was happy to do it. And that book came out very nearly 4 years ago, and Meet the Hybrids has sold pretty much every day. I've only noticed 2 days in 4 years that it didn't sell. And so it is obviously struck a chord. It has meant something. It's next year. It's coming out in French and Japanese language editions. The audio book is out now and actually outsells both the paperback and the Kindle combined. I mean,
oh my God,
people love that stuff.
that's
Yeah, you did strike a chord. I mean, it was important work, obviously, from the get-go. And so that's we're talking about. And so Meet the Hybrids, and you co-wrote that with Barbara. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And tell us how you saw the golden circles and you knew. Do you think that was your third eye, or maybe guided by the star people to work with these certain hybrids?
I tell you what does come up for me when I'm asked about them is that when Barbara was talking about these guys in her lectures and in the discussions we had, I just felt this overwhelming paternal sense towards them. I valued, respected, and wanted to protect and celebrate these guys. And I didn't even know them at that point. But that sense just sort of built as we moved into the project. And yeah, we still get people, I mean, Barbara, the other hybrids, myself, we get messages every week, one way or another, from people who are just saying this book has really meant a lot. And I want to thank you. Some people, so they don't want anything. They just want to reach out and say, thank you. This was meaningful to me. Yeah.
That's awesome. So when you were writing this particular book, and now you're in this and you're talking with Barbara and you're talking to all these people, what are you realizing? What is it that's happening to you on a personal level? You're talking to these people who are telling you these stories about themselves, and that many people in regular society would say, no freaking way, come on. Like they're out of their minds. It's just not, it's something else. They can't be this. How do you, as an author and as a researcher and as it's a serious dude, man, you take your stuff, you take your work seriously. How do you put this all together? How do you wrap your head around all this?
I would say that the first thing, if I was to give anybody advice based on the experience, and it's just words, because it's like, that Colin Powell said, no battle plan survives contact with the enemy. And when I love that quote, when Mike Tyson was asked, do you think at a press conference, I think some guy said, do you think you'll have a plan, or your opponent has a plan for you? He said, well, guess what? Everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the face. So the point being that even if I give somebody some advice on how to approach things, it may still just fall away as the information just starts to change their perspective. And it's difficult or impossible to prepare for that. I mean, how do you prepare to have your paradigm ruptured and I mean, it's not, the thing is, my experience was that what a lot of people try and do is, this subject is bigger than their world in general. This universe that we are all talking about here is bigger than that of most people. Most people live, like I was saying, a fairly ordinary life. Even if it's extraordinary in all kinds of interesting ways, it's still the run-of-the-mill mainstream thing. But it seems like this reality is far more complex and fascinating and ornate and challenging. And so what people try and do is they try and shrink this thing so to a manageable size so that they can shove it in a box. They can say they can shove it in a they're all crazy box. They're just tinfoil hat wearing, living in their mother's basement, just nut jobs. These are sad, whatever it is, whatever allows them to manage this thing. So for me, I realized that over and over again, I was having to expand if I was going to then contain any of this, because it was always bigger than me. So I had to keep expanding to accommodate it and work with it in some, useful philosophical way without, I think you have to let go of the desire to control it. That's part of it. I think in general, I think that's generally a good life advice. And every lesson I've ever had to learn, all the hard ones, has always come down to the same thing. And you could put it on my tombstone today. And that quote is, it's all about letting go. And that's my life lesson endlessly. And so I think that if you're trying to take on this subject, you got to let go every day. And sometimes you have to let go of someone on the internet tells you you're a ninth dimensional Pleiadian something. And I think it's healthy, to have a sense of doubt about that you might not be. You might be something else.
Right.
But I
do that with Krista all the time.
Yeah.
She starts talking about dimensions. I'm like, what dimension were you talking about there? We need to talk about that a little more. I don't know the fifth through the
so
eighth.
Revealed. Totally revealed. Try to hide. Hey, you guys. We're having a wonderful time in this segment interviewing Miguel Mendonça, author of Being with the Beings, Meet the Hybrids, and We Are the Disclosure series.
Yeah, and so Miguel, we want to switch gears a little bit, but I'm sorry that you were on a great thought there, and I am sorry to interrupt, but I have, me with comedy, when it presents itself, I have to go there. But no, and I think it's fascinating. Look, you are, the way you kind of describe this process of opening up to and finding space for these kinds of phenomena. And it's not just the tangible phenomena. We're talking about human beings who are going through it's what human beings are going through psychologically and emotionally, right? So you're talking to these people, and you're writing Meet the Hybrids with Barbara Lamb, and you're learning all of this, and you realize that I can put it in that place that works for me. I can open and expand my mind to accept this, or there's a middle ground somewhere where I'm going to approach this as a journalist, as a researcher, but I'm going to be open-minded to any and all possibilities. So at what point, when you were talking to all these hybrids, what were some of the things that these hybrids were saying that made you really just have to think about your paradigm?
The first thing that comes to mind is the heart, not the head thing. That I was approaching it from the social scientist perspective. It was just a piece of phenomenological research at the outset because it was my starting point. I just didn't know how involved in this I already was. That was the real trip of this whole thing, of listening to all their unfolding stories and wondering, why does this all sound so familiar to me when I've never considered myself as a hybrid? I mean, there's so much stuff that just unfolded in that process and continues to. But what was the question?
Well, how do you, so you're processing this, but at the same, so, you know, every time you interview someone, it's paradigm changing in a way, in one way, shape or form. So what were those moments where you were like, okay, my mind was just blown. I have to reconsider how I think about the universe we live in.
I mean, there's too many. There are way too many.
How did you normalize these fantastic stories? I mean, just in case nobody knows my story, I'm in this one here. This is a cosmic universe. I'm in here, me.
Being with the beings, Krista Risa.
This does it right here. So really, I mean, Tatiana, she does codes. She does the codes. You know, Vanessa knows when you're thinking about her. Jacqueline is from Universe 7, so it's one of my anonymous clients. Rob Gauthier, he channels the different densities. Vashta creates the artwork here, but also who created the Ryan Council work. We had, she just changed her Ashley just changed her last name from Ruiz. And Robert Fullington, there's so many really important people, and I say that not to create a sort of, you know, neoclassist system, because we certainly don't need that after the history of this planet and this hierarchical structure. But in studying these dimensions, and we've been talking about universal dharma and cosmic structure and things like this. And before this live show, we were talking about having access in these other dimensions, you know, when you're taking psychedelic plants and things like that. So how do you normalize something like having psi abilities and things like that? Is it because we certainly don't want to make people feel that they're not special or that they're not deserving of these types of experiences? A lot of everyday Joes, they want to have this. They want to make stuff look holographic, and they want to get contact, and they want to know if they have a star family out there. So did any of the people that you interviewed sort of give tips on how to level up their awareness, or did it just seem so seamless? You know, did it just happen? Did these people come in having these gifts and abilities, or was there some sort of, is there a cosmic clock? Did you find a common thread, I guess is what I'm asking, throughout these amazing texts, 700 years of worth of evidence?
What I would say is that, funnily enough, it was when I was thinking about this interview in the shower this morning, I just kept thinking about intuition and how much, like, so Jack and I write together. You know that, Krista, but the audience would know that. So Jack and I do screenwriting together, and it is absolutely crazy to me how, when we're in the flow, it's like ideas. It's like, imagine Jack and I walking through a supermarket together, happy couple, pushing our trolley, and it's like we don't even have to reach for anything. It's like as we go in the aisles, all the food is just falling into the cart. It's just there. It's just given to us, and we just have to say thank you. you know, and I mean, we spend half the time just falling around laughing. I mean, there's just
High vibe.
the
It's your vibes.
stuff that comes through is, and we got to talk afterwards about this thing. I was walking through a 5,000-year-old stone circle yesterday, and it happened. Boink! It just got dropped into my head. This idea that I think can form the central gimmick in this new subject that we want to move into, and I was just nearly at 90 degrees cracking up laughing as I was walking, and I was like, thank you. That was one of those moments.
Your multidimensionality is shining through, Miguel.
Well, I guess that's the point when you talk about normalizing psi abilities. I just think it's part of the toolkit. Everybody has intuition. Everybody has powerful dreams. Everybody has had the experience of thinking about somebody and they call. I mean, I had one that was so nuts, a person who had literally never, ever phoned me. And I lived in Ireland at the time. I was living in Cork, did my degree, and I was doing the dishes, and I suddenly turned to my partner and I said, Ren's going to call. And the phone rang, and it was Ren, a cousin of mine. And I, to this day, if I had a time machine, I would go back in time and I would say, hi, Ren, and completely do a head in, because it didn't come up with any caller ID. I didn't even, it was just one of those moments. And so I would say that it's just a part of life, but our mainstream paradigm is just education, work, bills, debts, stuff acquisition, bit of politics, holidays, taking photographs of your food. It's whatever is the normal thing to do in life, and that's what most people do. And we're taught that to be a good person, to be valid, to be validated, to be worthy is to tick a bunch of boxes so that you can fit and you can say, and you can compare notes, in fact. But if you opt out of that and you live in a very expanded kind of reality, and everything is energy and everything is consciousness and everything is conscious, and you walk past, I don't know, a pile of stones when you're out in the countryside, and you feel suddenly interested and involved in those stones, and you wonder what their story was, and you just have this feeling that even the stone is conscious, and you live in this is without psychedelics. I mean, it's not like psychedelics were not part of my research, applied research as a teenager. But I'm saying
there's a 70s movie like that, a British one, where the stone people, and they were on a farm somewhere out there, and the stones would turn to people at night and go back, and the ones who saw the stones changing were considered crazy, obviously, but they had the town was keeping it secret. You know, no one was allowed to know their town secret.
Yeah.
Oh, what's that British gem, Miguel? Do you know that offhand?
I do not. But you know, it reminds me of.
You should know all the British ones.
Lean.
Yeah, I know. The whole A to Z. But yeah, it reminds me of. I was on the train on the way up to Dublin, I think, when I was in Ireland, obviously, and there was this sweet little old couple sat opposite me, and it's just nothing but gorgeous countryside, and we're going fairly slowly, I guess, and the guy points out a fairy ring. You know what the fairy rings are in fields. And his wife kind of rolls her eyes and she says, my husband believes in fairies. And I kind of sit forward. I'm like, tell me about the fairies. let's have it. And yeah, he really went into one, and his wife not on board. And these guys are in their late 70s, early 80s, I'd say. But the guy was absolutely no. The fairies are real. There, and to say the Irish have a dry sense of humor is scandalously underplaying it. But I am positive this guy was legit, just based off his wife. I don't think it's a double act they do with tourists.
So will we be seeing a fairy book of elemental
Boy,
incarnates?
I tell you what, I mean, we go to Glastonbury a lot, and the amount of books on fairies in the bookstores, I think that subject's covered. Yeah.
Yeah. That's funny.
I think that box is ticked.
Look, I'm as guilty as anyone else. I consider myself open-minded, and I'm on this journey, right? And I'm progressive in the way I think, but it's sometimes I've reached that wall. Everyone has their place where they become a little bit, I don't want to say uncomfortable, but like I've accepted UFOs, ETs, all of that, right? Hybrids. I mean, abductions, obviously, but done a ton of work with that. Ghosts, right? I've gotten to that point. When you bring up fairies, I'm like, like I have to tell a quick story because we were with the psychic once in Florida, in DeLand, Florida, this old town, small town in Florida. We were doing an overnight ghost investigation. It was part of my research. We had a whole crew, and we had this psychic. The guy was an amazing psychic. I mean, stuff like you'd see orbs like coming in and out of him, like for real, in real time, without a camera. Like, I'm like, oh my God. Very strange guy though, and very difficult to get. He did, let's say, I always say the best psychics have 1 foot on the ground and 1 foot in the ethereal. This guy had both feet in the ethereal, way in the ethereal. Okay. So there's nothing to get. The nicest guy, but it was difficult for me. But one of the things he said, yeah, I live in this small little town outside of whatever, Florida, Jabip, right? So we're in the middle of nowhere. And he goes, every Tuesday night at 8:00, there's a parade of gnomes, fairies, you name it. And he watches them parade down this little dirt road in the woods. And at that point, he lost me, man. Now it might be real. I'm not saying it's not, but I'm like, that's not going in the investigation report. You know what I mean? Like, as a journalist, I'm like, I can't go there with you, buddy. I can't. I'm not going to say that it's not true, but what are we talking about here? Give me something. I need a string of something tangible.
Yeah, see,
to connect to that.
I just, in fact, I was in one of those bookstores in Glastonbury, Courtyard Books, and I don't know, somehow I got talking to this fella. And weirdly, I thought about, or not weirdly, I thought about that guy this morning. His name came to mind. I won't say what it was, but his name showed up. And I was like, why am I thinking of him? Anyway, now I know. He told me he was born on the sun.
Yeah, see, lost, done. I can't go there with you. I can't do that.
I mean,
I'm like, how is it possible?
And now we have in time for intermission. Thanks, guys. We're talking about fairies and extraterrestrials, hybrids, all things paranormal.
Yes.
In this segment, hey guys, in this segment, we're doing a 1-hour special interview with Miguel Mendonça, author of Being with the Beings, Meet the Hybrids, and the We Are the Disclosure series. So what's the deal, Jack? Why don't you like fairies? I mean, what did the fairies ever do to you?
And I'm sure tonight they're going to be banging on my head as I sleep because I pissed them off. I get it. I've had very strange experiences in my own life, but I was really speaking to Miguel's point of the whole idea of you have all this stuff that we don't know about, and the you have to approach it with an open mind. But I also think for the sake of research, for the sake of understanding, for people, you have to understand most people are starting at A. We do the same thing in our documentaries. We realize that most people are starting at A. They're not starting at M. So for them, it's a question of you gotta hold their hand along those. Like, what is that what is that object in the sky? Let's start with that. Have you ever seen a UFO? Then you go into, well, do you think abductions are real? Krista, you and I talked about Betty and Barney Hill on the show the other day. So then it becomes, well, is there contact? Is there some form of contact? And people have all these questions in their head. Well, are they interplanetary beings? Are they interdimensional beings? But when people aren't ready to go interdimensional, I'm telling you, the average person who's pays their bills, pays their mortgage, goes to work, right? The paradigm you talked about, Miguel, it's like that's all noise that interferes with the signal. And I feel like the signal is the universal truth of everything, right? But all that stuff, it's a distraction, but that's, as human beings, that's the society we live in. So they're not ready. So I don't hate fairy. I have nothing. I love the idea of fairies. I love gnomes. I mean, I'd love to be able to go outside tonight at 8:00 on a dirt road and watch a parade go down. That would change my paradigm. I would come back to you guys the next day a different person. I guarantee.
But you're probably listening to the guy explain these things for the whole taping. And he is probably telling you a whole lot more than just this one story. I'm thinking he probably had a ton of stuff going on. And you're going, well, give me the experience. Like, show me the gateway. What do they look like? Or something more moldable.
And I think if I had to interview the guy in depth, I would ask all those questions, because I'd have to get, for me, I'd have to get something that was like,
in this dimension,
process. What's the process of seeing it? Well, I'd ask him, is it interdimensional? Does it require a certain, is it because you're very psychic that you can see this, blah, blah, blah. But one of the things, because every one of us has dealt with this one thing. We've all interviewed people who are schizophrenic. Every one of us has interviewed someone or spoke to someone in this line of work that is schizophrenic. And I don't say that, and I'm not trying to be negative, and I'm not disparaging. I think it's a horrible illness, horrible thing. But there are schizophrenics out there. There are bipolar people out there. There are people who are absolutely hallucinating everything, or they're making it up, or they're just wanting to be important. So, Miguel, I'll ask you this. You're writing these books, and we're going to get to your disclosure book in a minute. But how do you discern? Did you ever come across with Barbara? And Barbara's the sweetest woman in the world, for those who don't know. She's ultimate professional, been doing this for years, and she's never going to disparage anyone, which is good. Obviously, these are her patients. These are the people that put their trust in her. But she also has to know and hear, as a researcher, it's like, okay, well, this person there might be an issue with. Miguel, as you're writing these books, as you're meeting all these people, how do you differentiate? How does your radar come on where it's like, okay, this person's for real. This person, I don't know, man. I just don't know.
Well, I think where you end up is recognizing that everybody is their own private universe. The rules are unique. The nature and structure of reality is unique. The beings that can exist within it are unique. The awareness is all of it. It's a universe. Each person is their own version of reality, and in a way, it's sometimes, to me, it seems borderline miraculous that you can meet people that you're so aligned with, but that's just superficially. I mean, there's been some great studies in art. What I'm saying is there's some great films out there and explorations of the way in which you can have three people experience something, and the movie, the TV show will show you the three different versions of that same experience. And obviously you've got to wonder, well, which is true? But the real question is, if I was there, what would my truth be? And I think that is the place I end up, because you can't pin down reality. It's always bigger and more complex than you. So either you pick something and you make it rigid and you say, this is it. If this is the box, everything I know what's in here, and anything outside of it is just outside of it, and that's not my business, and I don't care. Or they get positively hostile to anything outside the box because it's threatening, and humans are not good at dealing with threat, hostility. I mean, as we incarnate in physical bodies, these are very complex units. This is a thing that takes a lot to get through the day, and it's not just the body, but it's the heart, it's the emotional life, the emotional necessities. It's like we have biological imperatives, we have emotional imperatives, we have things we absolutely require. And it's interesting to me that when you get kids, small children, or very old people, they can have the same problem in life, which is they don't get cuddled enough. You were talking about before we were on air, the 2020 is the cuddly year or something.
Yeah.
This is what we're crying out for. Everybody, I mean, we're all in a state of trauma and confusion. I mean, life on this planet is...
You're saying life is schizophrenic on this planet.
It's everything. I mean, everything happens here. It's crazily polarized.
It's the humans, I tell you.
Bless them. I mean,
it's right. No, I was going to say, so it's all part of the human experience. I stand a little bit corrected. I appreciate that take, because you're right. What's to say that people who are quote unquote schizophrenic are the ones who are really closer to the truth than the people who are normal?
But I mean, it's just their trip. Ultimately, I think that it's like it comes back to that thing of it's all about letting go. Like, you need to let go of the need to be agreed with. That's what happened to me in We Are the Disclosure. I think I write something in the conclusion about that I let go of a lot of stuff in that. I mean, it's still, if I meet people who are belligerently narrow-minded, that they're just like, no, couldn't happen. Einstein said blah, blah, blah. They couldn't get here. It's too far. As if these people understand a goddamn word that ever came out Einstein's mouth. I generally find that if you push them on that, they don't have any knowledge of physics at all, but they're happy to quote somebody again who will say what's in the box and what's outside the box. They want an authority figure to tell them what's real. But as experiencers, you become the custodian of your own truth. It's like this ceremony where something from on high places the power of personal truth into your hands. And you can't, I mean, why would you give that up? I mean, plenty do. I did a lot of reading around cults this year, and I got very interested in the kinds of people who, I mean, obviously no one joins a cult. They don't want to say, I want to be in a cult. When they go to X, Y, or Z organization, they think it's something else. But then the mechanisms of the cult kick in over time, and those warm welcomes turn into some pretty sketchy, shady, nasty stuff. But in general, I think we all have our own relationship with the idea of truth, and you can never, ever, ever get bored of drilling down into what people's truths are when it comes to all these different questions.
Right.
And you're doing like this, it seems like you're also communicating that you've been looking at the whole picture. You're kind of describing to us, todo el mundo, that it's such it's not a painstaking process, but it's a real journey to investigate and study someone with this narrow bandwidth of knowledge you have about them, to like you said, is is the rational mind wants to put it into a box so that it's digestible and relatable, because we're dealing with a collective consciousness. But then you're having someone who is living in their own universe, in their own dimension, where anything's possible. And it's so super magical that it's kind of untouchable too. So this is very fascinating how you describe this. But I want to know more about the disclosure parts, because I'm assuming that most of us here know Barbara Lamb. I mean, if anyone doesn't know Barbara Lamb, you need to find her. She's, if you know about Mary Rodwell, Dolores Cannon, you need to know about Barbara Lamb. She's a very benevolent regressionist, and she's also in the J3 film, right? In the Seeding. She's in the Seeding Part 2 by J3 Film. But here in Disclosure, we've got Alexis Brooks, Lynn Buchanan, Michael Cremo. And my partner's always talking about Michael Cremo. I think he's doing an upcoming event soon here in Sedona. Klaus Dona, Stanton Friedman, Robert Fullington. How did you get these people to communicate? I mean, did you just use your galactic charms on them? Like, how did you?
That's an impressive group, Miguel. Yeah, I mean, you got people, and now we're talking about We Are the Disclosure.
Hernandez, yeah,
a people's history of the extraterrestrial field, and this is a thick one. This is a big book. I'll show you right here. And it's amazing, and there's a lot there. That's a great question, Chris. I mean, Miguel, how long did it take to kind of wrangle all these people? Because some of them are, not easy to wrangle.
It was actually really quick. Most people that I interview, a lot of them are researchers. They're people who don't often get asked for their opinion. There's like Lee Spiegel, for example, who is one of the most long-serving journalists in this field, and Lee, I don't think, gets asked nearly often enough for his view of things. And what I really wanted to do was to take the biggest view of this subject I could. So I tried to find people who represented all kinds of different aspects of it, so that anybody could get something out of this, that when they read the thing cover to cover, by the end of it, because I've got a standard set of questions, although people will obviously go off in all sorts of different directions, you get to read across the answers, and you get to boil down what is the sort of core of experience and perspective on whatever it might be. And I think what was so fascinating is that I asked a lot of them, one of my final questions was, do you have an ET aspect? And for some of these people, I was,
Leo Sprinkle said yes. He said, yes, I am a starseed.
A lot of people did. People I did not expect. I just thought they would say no. Wow. And that would be it, next question. But I don't think there was anybody asked that question to that did not take it to an amazing place. It was a real, and some of the guys are not even with us anymore.
Cynthia Crawford, you dedicated one of your books to.
Yeah, Cynthia passed. Rosemary Ellen Guiley, who wrote the forwards, she passed. Stanton Friedman, Jim Mars.
Yeah, and a lot of big, the contributions are amazing in this field.
I mean, this is the thing. I interviewed people who remembered Kenneth Arnold's sightings.
Oh, my God.
In the newspaper, on the radio.
Yeah, that's an incredible perspective. Yeah.
So, I covered, I mean, that's why the original 2-volume version was subtitled 700 Years of Research. Like, collectively, that's what there is. But yeah, I decided I got one of my shower downloads. I was in the shower one morning, and it just came through, said it's time to put it into a single volume. And I'm like, that's kind of a bit of work, but I'm glad I did. And so I wanted people to have that complete experience and that complete resource. It would be no overstatement to say that that process in particular changed my life. And mostly, as I said, it was just that thing of, coming to terms with the idea that I did not need to impose my reality on anybody else's. I didn't need to be agreed with. I didn't need people to agree with each other. That really the spice of all of this is that we are all, in a sense, just aspects of creation, whatever you want to call it, nature, reality, learning about itself in endless profusion and variation. And so when we come together, if you and I are doing a writing session, Jack, we both bring so much to those sessions because collectively we've lived for about a century. 100 years of experiences and sort of boiling things down, it just adds so much to the process. And that is what we are all doing. I mean, the world, it's crazy, but it's also beautiful. It's extraordinary. And I wouldn't miss it.
That's awesome stuff. Well, we're here with Miguel Mendonça, author, researcher, and pretty much Renaissance man all around in my book. Listen, we're going to go longer today. Miguel, you up for another segment? Because there's too much good stuff here. So let's continue this.
I have so many questions.
It's just so good. I mean, Miguel, we could talk to you all day, and we'll definitely have you back on. I have a question. The Disclosure book, and I love it. We Are the Disclosure. The way I read that title is, we are the disclosure. We are. That's what I get from that. We are the disclosure. Don't wait for the government to disclose anything. They're not going to. We are the disclosure. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know I'm kind of embellishing, but that's the way I look at that. That's the way I read that. Was that the purpose?
It's something Barbara said in some conversation we had somewhere down the line, and it stuck. It really struck a chord, and I just thought, but that is exactly how it is. What you get from the government is only really going to be political or technological. It's going to be material. But in We Are the Disclosure, what I became aware of is this spectrum. And on the one end, I kind of see the more masculine end. That's where a lot of people start. It's the hardware, it's the technological stuff. It is physical, political, material, and then you move along that. Most people, certainly experiencers, get shoved along that spectrum pretty fast through the kind of sociological and into the sort of well-being and spiritual end, or the more feminine, as I think of it, end of the spectrum. And that to me is where the real energy is, because in the masculine end, which I consider typical ufology, it's basically stuck in a loop, which is claim, denial, claim, denial, claim, denial, claim, denial. And you can't get out of that loop. There is no way out, because there's nothing that you can do to, short of opening up God knows what kind of bases and saying, here's some ET technology, here's the bodies, you can't touch them, but here's some live ones, and have like an open day, an Area 51 open day. And even then, people would walk out, no, it's just special effects. It's CGI. It's the thing in a suit. I don't know what that is. It cannot be an alien. It can't be.
But, I feel bad for those people, because won't it just be so chilling when you use all of your energy to push away at something? Aren't those usually the people that are going to create that in their experience, because they're that there's a saying, what you resist persists. So like the guy who gets on the stage just to battle all the alternative thinkers, I mean, he at the end of the day, he must be having manifesting something so unique. It just there's just this feeling, that there's some part of them must want this. And I'm not saying that any of us here are asked to have these wild experiences that we sat here praying to have a praying mantis come in, like the stuff you can't really make this up is what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
It's just so and there's just, I really appreciate your writing because it's you clearly went to school and you say, this is what I found, look, these are the problems. It's kind of political, it gets a little political here, and you're not really happy with the system, but it's just the way you pushed your interviewees into their own knowledge just shows on your part you've done some soul searching, you've done some divine feminine spirituality work on yourself. And do you have your own methods for dealing, I think we've kind of covered this, but just for handling the sheer amount of information that can come from one other person? You said the star seeds activate each other. How do you manage your surfboard between the third dimensional 9 to 5 rat race and the wild world of star seeds? How do you stay in the middle?
That's a good question. I think it's compartmentalization. I've got what they call a hungry mind, or I'm sure there would someone somewhere, if I sat down and answered a few questions, searching questions, would brand me ADD, ADHD, whatever, and I just have one of those minds that's always on the go. So it's not healthy if I have too much time just to think in a very free, unstructured way, because there's almost too much to think about. So I like to be focused and just give everything to this thing for X period of time. That's the lovely thing about doing a book, because it's so physical. It's done. It is finished. There. End of project. Move on. Just that tangible completion is important. And then, but I mean, now what I do is I work with authors on their book projects. So it's I don't have to do any transcription. So that's the good news. They can do the transcription.
Awesome.
400 hours, I'm done. That 400 hours of transcription.
I mean, look at your hands. You still have them. This is good.
I do.
Story time. Yeah.
Yeah, these are. Yeah, it's my favorite part of me. I still have these moments of catching myself as a sort of spirit experiencing a body,
Yeah.
Like, do you ever feel like, did you ever see, I don't know, any kind of robotic thing and feel some resonance? Like you see a robot in a movie and you just think, but that's kind of how it is. You're a consciousness in a body. Like, I see this as
The last Mimsy, the kids talk to the doll and it's an alien and it shows them to get to the UFO. No? Okay.
No, The Last Mimsy.
Yeah, The Last Mimsy. Yeah, it's a children's movie.
Cool. I'm going to look it up.
People say that the ETs can contact you through their plants, through a doll. That's why people are scared of clowns, because I don't know. I'm just saying. That's what other people said. But what was the most, okay, because clearly you're moving more into writing scripts and storylines, maybe movies. Who knows what's next for you? Could you tell us what was one of the best stories from the experiencers, the hybrids, the star seeds, the experiencers? What was one of the wildest, or something that you remember?
I mean, Robert Fullington's they are 10 out of 10 solid gold. And the way, and he's the best storyteller. I mean, I've heard a lot of stories in this realm. Rob he's the Jimi Hendrix
Yeah, his
of
was far out.
experiences.
Yeah.
He's the king. I mean, I did do a video where I took the audio from one of the interviews I did with him and I set it to music and I did the video thing. So I've images that he took of a craft when he was having this wild experience of connecting with a craft, him and Megan, his partner, and his wife, and all Rob's stories. I mean, this one, I was thinking about it in the Stone Circle yesterday. I must have been getting prepped for today. There's this whole thing where they remove that he sees his consciousness is outside of his body. They've taken his consciousness out and they've also taken off the top of his head. And there's a being with its fingers in his brain pan, massaging his brain or doing something.
Was it a reptilian? Sorry, I had to go there, David.
No, I think it's a mantis.
Yeah,
it probably sounds like a mantis.
I think so. Yeah, there's photographs out there. Yeah.
Rob talks about that. He talks about in the EX2, the seating. Yeah. And it kind of, we were, most of our stories involved unexplained the idea of fertilization or hybridization as it's a sexual process. It's there's some fertilization and then something is born from the physical being is born from two, whatever, a combination of DNA. But when Rob went into this, that his consciousness was, in another being, or this ET clone or whatever it was, and then he looked down and he was that body, and his fingers were moving, and he freaked out. And of course, the way he tells it, it's hilarious and compelling and fascinating all at the same time.
Emotional too.
Very emotional. I mean, he is we have some great people in the film, but Rob is definitely the Babe Ruth. I mean, because people resonate with that raw emotional, very sincere way he tells his story.
And you said, Miguel says here that the hybrids need emotional support too, which was really cool. And that's also what I love about J3 Films, is you really feel supported by the whole crew. So
yeah, that's the key.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry.
No. And Miguel, that's one of the things we've talked about, the idea that in the end, these are whatever's going on as human beings, we're all in this together. And whatever that human experience is, and these people are having these experiences, they are, whatever, they're hybrids or researchers, and they all have their own stories, and they're all on the same journey. They're trying to figure out what the heck, what's this all about, right? And that's something you and I, we've talked about at length. I mean, it's like, that's what matters. And I think one of the things I love about your work, and I do want to ask you about some of your recent stuff and the things you might want to start getting into or are getting into, but you're always a humanitarian about it. You're not, you go about it and you care about the people you interview. You care about the people whose stories you're telling. And that's the only way to do it, because if you're robotic and you don't care, it's going to come across. You can't just be journalist. You can't help but be a human being and be like, I get it. I understand some of this. I've had some of these kinds of experiences, and we empathize, if nothing more, empathize with the things. Do you want to just expand?
I mean, I'd seen, God knows how many documentaries in which experiences were just absolutely mauled, trashed, laughed at, exploited. And it was horrifying to me that here are people, I mean, there's just a lack of empathy. There's a lack of basic human values in that approach, that sort of cheap, exploitative, I think materially oriented piece of work. I mean, some people would inevitably find conspiracy there and say, well, it's all about trying to pick the people who look the craziest and make them look nuts, and just so that the rest of everybody else can go back to sleep. But I think if you are genuine in your desire to understand, then the first thing you have to do is try your best to put your ego to one side and not come from the head entirely. You have to do this work with the heart. And when you'd asked me about what was the most important thing I got out of the Meet the Hybrids process, working with those guys, that was it. It was that head, not the heart thing. And it doesn't, or let's just say it's about a balance. It's about not being just stuck in the intellectual. Because if you're just stuck in the heart, I mean, you're in for a lot of damage in this world. I mean, that happened to me as an environmentalist. I'm still suffering the effects of it today. And that was nearly 10 years ago that I had to move away from that work. So, all of this, every time you open your heart, it's a risk. It's like anything else. If you open your wallet and you leave it in public, there is a risk. But I think that, in the end, it's about trying to come to terms with the fact that you can be your best self. You don't have to live in a way that pleases other people, or that just meets the very low standards often of the way in which we treat one another in our culture. There's a friend of mine, Mike, who changed my life more than anybody, probably because he always lived in absolute authenticity, more than anybody else I ever met. And he can't not do it. And it is absolutely hysterical to watch him go to town on people. You just watch him interact with members of the public, or somebody in a shop, and watch Mike just go to work. When he goes to meet that person, he goes to the counter, and they are just zoned out, switched off, bored. The fences are up. They don't want to know. They don't want to get involved. And I tell you what, after 2 or 3 minutes of Mike just playing with them, bouncing off them, the sun comes out. And this person there's nothing they wouldn't open up about, nothing they couldn't share. He makes a safe space. He makes life beautiful. And it's not hard to do. You just have to be willing to roll the dice and risk it and just say, this is who I am.
Just give it a try. Yeah. Just give it a try. Showing up. That is such a good message. That's great advice. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good stuff, Miguel. What's next for you, buddy, besides writing really good screenplays with me?
Well, like I said, we'll have to talk about that after.
It's a secret.
I got this thing that is it's so hard not to just spit it out right now, but I want to set it up properly. And but I think, right now I'm working with a healer based in Colorado, who is doing a book on walk-ins. And I had my own walk-in experience back in January 7th. For 3 weeks, I woke up a different person.
I remember you said you were not cursing. You would not, when we get together and talk, we curse a lot like sailors when we do our work. He wouldn't curse, Krista, for 3 weeks. He's like, I don't curse anymore. So I felt bad cursing. I can't stop cursing. That's who I am. Mm-hmm. So here's Miguel. Like, I can't. I'm like, what? And here's the thing: the pirate left the room. The pirate left the room, and I was left my own being one pirate without another pirate.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: no, but it's like, and I'm looking at him like he was fine. but it was interesting. But see, walk-ins is one of those things for me, and we'll do shows on it. We will. I'm open to it, but I'm like, ew,
Crying.
what, are you going to have to explain that to me in a major way? And so, but that is interesting. So you are doing work now. You're doing research on walk-ins. Chris, I know you know a ton of, you know a lot about walk-ins, right?
Okay, so Miguel asked me,
Mm-hmm.
just like that. So Krista, like, you know all about that. And working with people like yourselves has really helped to what the Palladians call integration of the experience, because there's this part of you that just denies it, you know, like here's all the evidence, you're like, nope, it's all fake. That's the egoic monkey mind, the resistor cells, as Ra calls them. And I was told, I said, Miguel, I don't know about walk-ins. Yvonne Perry, Yvonne Smith, which one it was? Sorry, I forgot. Not the hypnosis. The one with the light language. Yeah, Perry. She probably knows.
Yeah.
But I was told, I want to tell Miguel, I was told he said before the broadcast, I look like a middle-aged nurse. And I'm laughing because I was told my last life was a walk-in World War II nurse.
Ooh,
and so
GTFO.
Yeah, not for clout points, not for clout points, because so what does that mean? That means your soul comes into someone's body because what they can't handle the planet, like your soul's going, hey, I can handle this, and then you step in there and then you step out. Or
Miguel needed a break from writing with me because we'd been writing for 6 months and he needed a break. So he's just like, something else, come into me and help me escape.
It was honestly, I mean, I've had some weird experiences, but this was a 10. This is,
wow.
I mean, I was able, I mean, the stuff that happened that I couldn't even talk about publicly. I mean, off air, between friends, I would say he was an experience, but I mean, how can I talk about it without saying what it was? But let's say I was able to have the experience I could generalize it to say that I was at the same time, it's like I was behind the wheel of someone else's car, but where I was, what I was defined as was so tough because it was like in and out all the time. Like I could at times become more Miguel, if you like, but there was always like a point I could not pass. But it was like this other being, this other consciousness, this other version it's like that was behind the wheel, I guess. It's like maybe but it was so hard to differentiate, to say which was which at any given time. Or was I both? Or
perhaps.
I mean, I interviewed like Barbara, Mary, for people who don't know, Barbara Lamb, Mary Rodwell, Leo Sprinkle, Christiane Quiros, oh my God, Jacqueline Smith. I talked to Rob Fullington about it. I talked to Matt Thomas. All these people are in Meet the Hybrids. All kinds of people. I just said, look, this is what is happening. What do you think? How do you read this? How do you relate to it? How do you define it? Can you put any kind of terminology around this thing? And I wrote 40,000 words in 2 weeks from those interviews, from my process. What I did was an entire metaphysical life review, 45 years of metaphysical experiences from birth to today, just so that I could put it all together and try to build a sense of what is the through line for this person. How did that person get to have this experience? And then I guess I was like, halfway through writing a book on the subject, and then I don't know, it just snapped. I snapped out of it. Yeah. just one thought, and I was like, boom, back with a vengeance. Yeah.
Is it similar to possession? See, I don't know. I have no clue on this. It's different? Got to be different than possession, right?
I mean, possession is not an agreement in the sense of, it's not a very pleasant agreement if it is an agreement. You know, it's like a smash and grab. Whereas typically the walk-in experience is what I would call transient and transacted. That I mean, for me, it was transient, it was temporary, but it was transacted, I feel, because the version that took over for 3 weeks, I would say, was benign at the very least, but felt like it felt like a beautiful spirit. But it was just like it was like I was seeing it and was it at the same time. So I was able to be in the experience and observe the experience simultaneously. And I remember we went for pizza in Park Street in Bristol, and it was dark. It was January at that point, and we're looking out. We're sat by the window waiting for our pizza, and I'm looking out at some of the shops and the people, and it was like I was visiting another world. Like I was seeing it in a totally different way. Like, that's how they do stuff here. That's what the people look like. That's the energy of the place. But I didn't, like, normally, as a person, I have a lot of social anxiety. I have a fairly jaundiced view of human experience on most days. How can I put it?
But that's admirable, because that leaves space leaves space for you. You're not coming in here going, I'm a walk-in, you know, I'm King Tutankhamun and I'm here to save you all. No, you're saying, you know, I have my stuff too. I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for a lot of people in this field, there is, I mean, the word identity comes up endlessly for me when I'm looking at people are so happy to grab something and say, I'm this or I'm that. If someone will tell them, there's somebody I knew in the past, in a previous life, in this life, when I was doing my horticulture process, and they popped up out of nowhere and said, oh, I've been told I'm a such and such dimensional Pleiadian or something.
Assyrian? No?
Pleiadian in this case, I think.
Oh.
And I'm like, I mean, this person had also been like super wrapped up in some bizarre church where all the congregation has to marry each other. So this is somebody who's always been searching. This is a seeker. But somebody who is, you know, everybody's on their own trip. I mean, there's no judgment. It's just that is the way that she goes at it. Like, jumps in both feet. I'm this now. Now I'm this. You can call me blah and make up their own name. And but for myself, just because of my construction, there's a lot of different facets, and obviously every day is evolution for me. Every day is asking myself, which version am I really, or is that the wrong question? You know, is it just, this is who I am for this situation today? But we have this idea, we have a residual self-image, I think, which is what keeps us sane. It's what keeps us anchored and grounded. And I think when that residual self-image gets messed with, some people are fine. They are delighted to let go of the residual self-image and adopt the new persona. That's them. That is their makeup. That is their nature, and that's their path. And they can make it work. But for some people, They cannot. They implode in this process because it's like they just kick off the training wheels before they are ready. You know, they go for it. And maybe that's what they're here for. Everybody, I do think, I mean, it's the only way I can explain human behavior is that we plan it, we have in mind this is what we want. And it's the only thing that explains anything that I look at in the world, because otherwise it's all insanity. And I just think, well, humans are just crazy. They're just crazy, because why would you get out of bed and go out into the world and say, I'm going to do what I can today to push fossil fuels? No matter what I know about it, about what that's doing, I'm going to do it. It has got to be. I mean, I'm not willing to. I can't comprehend it any better than this. That person came here to be that person, to play that role, because how could I play this role if they don't play that role? It's like two boxers on Saturday, Andy Ruiz Jr., Anthony Joshua. If only Joshua shows up, how does Ruiz get to defend his title? And vice versa. Even if you are in conflict, you are still in collaboration. It's still important work that you're getting done collectively. There's no other way to do it.
Right. Wow. That's incredible. Very enlightening, Miguel. We're going to wrap up here in a couple minutes, but I do want to mention a couple things to the viewers. First, and we're going to have you on again, Miguel, if you'd like to come on. We'd love to have you. And we'd like to make you like a recurring guest, right? Kind of like Burt Reynolds on the Johnny Carson show or something, you know, Don Rickles. I don't know. We'll figure it out. but anyway,
you're a star.
Yeah, exactly. No, we just love you to
all
death.
I can think of now is the one where is where he comes in with the shaving foam and he sprays the shaving foam all over his crotch, and then the bit going down his leg.
And that's when we turn on the music louder.
Yeah, that's when we turn on the music. We have some stuff scrolling, some banners on some sites, Miguel, that for your book. So it's real quickly, how can people find your stuff?
Amazon.
Any of these books, We Are the Disclosure, Meet the Hybrids, Being with the Beings, all on Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, there's you can get them in. I mean, people in their own countries know where that they can go if they don't have Amazon. There's all sorts. For most nations have their own version of an online bookstore. They can find it. You can order it internationally. There's no problem. And the audio book, you can get that through iTunes, Audible, or you can probably buy it straight through Amazon as well, I guess.
Well, thank you so much, Miguel. It's been an honor to have you on our show as our very first guest, and hope you all get to reading these books, because there are more creative projects coming from this person internationally, you guys. The internet is amazing. It's great to have you, and I guess we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Miguel.
I
loved it. Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad to be a part of it. And, it's fun to be the first guest, to be, like I said, the one-man shakedown crew. So it was good. You guys did a great job. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So did you, buddy.